All right, so today I'm going to talk about how to build an application security program from scratch. A little bit about myself. I have had 12 years in information security. The last 4 of those I have been full-time in application security. The companies that I've worked for in the professional services industry, both as a consultant and on the services side, banks and software service provider that provides software to banks. A little bit about my background. I'm a bit of a reformed developer. Through college, I did do development work as both an intern and side jobs and things like that. And I am a SAN certified web application pen tester, CISSP. And a little bit about me personally. I have a wife and 2 kids. I enjoy mountain biking, and I like to sample new bourbons, new stouts, and bourbon barreled stouts. To go into some statistics about the importance of application security and how it really isn't being given the attention it deserves, I found some statistics that were taken by the Ponemon Institute. And when they surveyed a number of security professionals, the response was that the greatest risk to their organization was application security, overwhelmingly. And second to that was data security, then network security, and then going down into the human layer, the host, and physical security. But when they also asked them how much they spend on application security, you'll see that in the second bar in the graph for application security, it's ranked 3rd, whereas network security is ranked number 1. So what you'll see is for all the other categories, we're pretty much on par where we should be spending, but the roles are reversed for network security and application security. We have a huge overspend in the network layer and an underspend in the application layer. So I'm going to talk to you about how to begin addressing those application security issues. And little disclaimer first, the views that I express are not necessarily representative of the companies I currently work for or previously worked for. And the stories have been changed to protect the innocent. And I've also taken a creative liberty to cover up my mistakes because, quite frankly, I learned all of this stuff by making mistakes. And hopefully this presentation will help you not have to go through those same mistakes in your own application security program. So I start out my first day on the job, and I was inexperienced in application security. Even though it had been a part of my job before, it was never my full-time responsibility, and I didn't really have any experience with the tools that I was using. We had a client concern that came up, and I had to run a vulnerability scan over the weekend. I was the only one available to do it. And that was I learned a lot from that. And once I learned to use the tool, then the attitude was we need to scan everything. And really the way we were doing application security was through vulnerability scans and pen testing. And we would send the PDFs to the developers and expect the developers to fix it. And the assumption was they really would do it, right? Well, it didn't really work that way. We had a few problems. I mean, how do you, especially as a new employee, how do you know what to scan and when to scan it? Do you know the SDLC and the release calendar? Do you have enough manpower to do it? I was the only person in this organization doing that with a number of applications. So how do you scale to that level and be able to address your application security concerns? Are your developers really going to pay attention to a PDF that they get in an email? Most people I know get over 100 emails a day. Are they really going to pay attention to yours? And how will you keep track of the remediation, especially when you're focusing on scanning everything? The point is that while we find all the issues, it really doesn't mean a hill of beans until people are actually fixing those issues. So the first thing that I did was learn. And anybody interested in getting into application security, these are some great resources for learning about software security. When I left my job to take on this responsibility in application security, one of the guys on the application security team gave me the OAuth software assurance maturity model. And that really gives you all of the elements that you want in your application security program. And it's a great place to start. To get more in depth, there's a book called Software Security, Building Security In by Gary McGraw. And it's a really good reference for how to deal with developers and how to integrate yourself into the SDLC. And from a technical standpoint, how do you attack an application? The Web Application Hacker's Handbook is second to none, and I think most people who don't really even have a background in application security can begin with this book and learn from the ground up how to attack an application, and it really covers pretty much everything. So going into building an application security program, we have to start with the process, and that's not the sexy part of security. Most people want to attack, but we have to have a process in order to make sure that we're really addressing the issues. So we need to start out with an application inventory, and especially going new into this organization, I didn't know what the applications were. And all subsequent steps are based on understanding all the applications in your environment. If you use a GRC tool like RSAM or Archer, that's pretty much the basis for how they track risks oftentimes, or at least how most organizations design it. So how do you build an application inventory? Start with, and this is a thing that you're going to see throughout the presentation, reuse the stuff that's already exists in your organization. Start out with a disaster recovery inventory. And that's not going to be perfect. I guarantee you that they're missing applications. So then go to your server guys, and hopefully they have a server inventory, and tie those servers to the applications that they support. So merge those together, and you've got a much better inventory. And then even after that, go to your business or IT owners for those systems and give them the list of applications that you show that they own, and have them look at it. Number one, they're probably going to come up with other applications, maybe new applications that are under development for you to add to it. And the other thing is they're going to find applications that have already been sunset. So then you can go back to your IT organization, make sure that the hardware has been decommissioned, and cross it off your list so you don't have to worry about it anymore. Make sure you include all types of applications, COTS applications, in-house developed, bespoke or contractor developed applications. And note those as such in your inventory, because you're going to have to address those risks in very different ways. You can't run a source code analysis against a COTS application. It's really hard to do that. So you have to treat them differently. There are tools that you can do static analysis on, and then we need to start prioritizing our resources. So like I talked about before, I don't know of any IT organization or security organization that has enough people, has enough money. So where do you focus that effort? And how do you focus your controls? You probably don't necessarily want to encrypt the database of a brochureware site, but you have to for any PCI applications. So how do you prioritize how those controls get implemented on your applications? And what I've done is doing a risk scorecard or a business impact analysis, and making a short 20-question multiple choice questionnaire for the business owner to go through. And it's going to address the three legs of security: the confidentiality, what data fields are included in that application, does it have intellectual property, does it have PII, financial, employment information, those sorts of things. Does it have an integrity impact? If you've got an application that's doing financial transactions, somebody's not going to like if their bank account balance was changed, or at least if it was made lower. Branding, your company's website, if that were to be defaced, how would that look on your company? And how would that look on your security program? It would be even though it may not affect your operations, it would be a real embarrassment to your organization. When you're talking about embedded systems, often those control mechanical devices. So any impact on the messages being sent by those embedded systems could have a kinetic impact and cause loss of life. From an availability perspective, look at your, again, go back to your disaster recovery business continuity program and ask them what the recovery time objective is. If you've got an application with a low recovery time objective, it's probably very critical to the organization and going to be something that you want to focus on. Again, we need to look at brand, look at your company's website, and the ability to generate revenue through some of those websites. And the output of that is you should have take your inventory and risk rank all of your applications into 3 to 5 categories: low, medium, and high. And then I recommend, especially as you're starting out, maybe spend 80% of your effort securing those high-risk applications, and then maybe 20% of your effort on the medium-risk applications, and maybe ignore the low-risk applications to begin with, because you want to focus your effort on the jewels. And as you secure the jewels of the organization, you can begin working down the priority list. And then when we set this process in motion, I'm still having a hard time getting the issues fixed. developers were still sidestepping it within their SDLC. So you need to start putting enforcement points within your SDLC. And again, like I said before, leverage existing processes. If you have a change control that gets signed off on before going into production, get security involved in that and sign off on it and make sure that vulnerability scans have been run, that reviews have been performed within the application before it goes live. And that gate will prevent people from sidestepping the process. If you have a design review, get security involved in that and help with that design review to make sure that those security controls are put in place up front. Work with the project management office. Oftentimes they have a list of steps that all the projects have to go through in order to go to production. So the project manager can help you enforce those gates. And we have to be careful how we leverage this, though. We don't want to rule with an iron fist. Sometimes if a team is sidestepping the process all the time, make an example out of them, because once you make an example out of somebody, it probably won't happen again. But at the same time, you can't be an asshole, because security already has a reputation for stopping stuff. So to go into just some basic tips on how to do application security and some of the things that organizations get hung up on, the tooling. Oftentimes I hear that companies choose their vulnerability scanners by doing a bake-off, and which one finds the most vulnerabilities. Well, again, you can find all the vulnerabilities you want, but if they aren't getting fixed, then what have you gained? So what I recommend is look at the different tools and how they integrate with your SDLC. How do they integrate with your tooling? From a static analysis perspective, there's tools that integrate better in a continuous integration environment, or more in an agile methodology. And there's some tools that really do not have the speed and scalability to work to that. So even though a tool may have the best detection rate, if it doesn't integrate with your SDLC, then you're going to lose. You want it to be very easy for the developers to run the scans and correct the issues. Developers will eat you alive, and I found this out when I first started in the job. They expect you to understand the technology and what they're doing. And because it had been so long since I had done development, I got eaten alive. And in fact, the guy that hired me regretted it the first month that I was there. But as you scale up and got back in the saddle, it was easy to, it helped a lot to gain the respect of the developers. And I think because of that, anybody who's dealing with the developers, whether it be your pen testers, your consultants, or your application security team, they need to have an application focus. They need to understand the application. They need to be willing to dig into the code and understand it. One of the examples that I often quote is that there was a developer who said that a SQL injection vulnerability wasn't real. And I had tested it manually, and I knew that it was. And he kept saying that it wasn't. And I asked him, well, how did you write your query? And he said that he had written a parameterized query. And I said, well, show me your source code. And when he sent me the source code, it was very obvious that he had written a textbook dynamic query. And I could send it back to him and say that this is clearly vulnerable to SQL injection. And to be able to do those sorts of things is really important. Your pen testers, if your pen testers aren't asking for source code as part of their pen test, they're probably doing you a disservice, because there's a number of vulnerabilities that can't be found unless you look at the source code. And even when you're looking at things such as cross-site scripting, a pen tester may be able to see that something doesn't look right there, but unless they can look at the source code, it may take them a lot of banging on it to get around any input validation that you're performing. And additionally, when the pen testers find those issues, they need to go back to the developers, help you go back to the developers and fix the issue. And you can send them an OS cheat sheet, but oftentimes the fix that OS recommends may not be able to be implemented into the code. And you have to do some negotiation and find something that will work while still addressing the problem, even though it isn't necessarily a textbook example. We need to take a developer's perspective at things. Even though I said earlier developers are sharks, they're being preyed on by tigers all the time. And our instinct is to think that our interest is the most important. and that if developers aren't addressing the issues, they're doing it because they hate you or they hate security. The thing is that developers have a number of competing interests. They have their manager telling them they need to do their performance review or set their goals for next year. They have the QA tester telling them that they need to fix the functionality issue that didn't pass QA testing. And most importantly, the biggest tiger of them all is the client asking for more functionality in their applications. And that's oftentimes going to take priority. And we need to find a way to work with the development organizations to fix those. So I recommend we treat, instead of sending developers PDFs, we treat issues as bugs. If we send an email to the developers, they'll say that they'll fix the issue, but they're not being tracked to fix those issues. So make sure that you're putting any issues that you find into the issue tracking system, and then get it put into the backlog, and make sure that you're working with the product manager or the application owner so that anytime they are prioritizing those functionality issues and improvements that need to be made to the application, your security issues are right along with it and they're being prioritized. And you're not going to get all the issues in your pen test fixed right away, but we'll be making incremental improvement and making sure that we address the highest risk issues first. The other thing that other mistake that a lot of organizations make is that they focus on vulnerability testing and pen testing. But how do we get proactive? How do we make sure that those issues are never put into code? And it's really important to develop policies and standards that developers have to abide by when they write code. And then make those as requirements in every application. Make them as part of the functionality requirements. And then when you get to the pen test or the vulnerability scan, those issues shouldn't be there. So some resources that I recommend for writing an application security policy is, obviously any application security policy needs to cover the OS top 10. And then from there, OS puts out the OS Developers Guide, which will give a number more in-depth requirements. And while that's dated 2005 and maybe a little out of date, they are working on getting that updated by the end of the year. Additionally, the ISO 27002 standard 2013 edition has an enhanced section on application security that's quite good. So you can reference those in documenting your own application security policy. Ben hit on this a lot. Ben hit on this in his talk earlier. We need to be careful how we deal with developers. A lot of pen testers and a lot of security folks laugh at developers when they make a stupid mistake. I'm amazed at the number of times that I still go into an application and I see input validation being performed through JavaScript. Take that as an opportunity to train the developer. Oftentimes, most schools nowadays, even in their development classes, they are not teaching security. So the developers don't get trained on how to address these issues. So we need to train them. We need to take their hand and teach them the things that they need to be worrying about. And oftentimes what I found is when I find an issue not fixed the proper way, I take their application and use tools that they may be using, like Fiddler instead of Burp Proxy, and show them how that validation could be bypassed. You know, show them that I can intercept that request between the browser and the server and tamper with it and bypass any of that JavaScript validation. So when you do those examples, it sticks in their mind and things click with them, and they'll never make that mistake again. Don't blindly trust your tools or your pen testers. I think oftentimes we as security organizations make the mistake of, if it comes out of a vulnerability scanner, it must be true. Or if it comes from a pen tester, it must be true. We need to second guess all of those cases. And there was a case that I had where a pen tester had found a cross-site scripting vulnerability. And the issue was really unique, and I'm not going to get into the details, but the bottom line was it was going to cost $3 million to fix this issue. And that's a big deal for an organization. So they sent it back to me, and when I saw the cost that it was going to be, I went in and dug into the issue more myself. Part of the reason was to try to find a better way to fix the issue than maybe what development was proposing. But what I found was that the issue was not exploitable. There wasn't a way to exploit the issue on a modern browser. So and I sent it back to the pen tester, and the pen tester agreed with me. But they were just blindly taking things that came, they were working through their interception proxy and found the issue, and with the interception proxy, it was valid. Another case, we had an application that a client required us to pen test the application, and we considered it low risk, so we didn't regularly pen test that app, but because of the client's use of it, it was high risk to them. So we had to pen test the app and send the client a summary report, and came back with more issues than we would like. But by going through and retesting those issues and taking the perspective of our organization and how that application is set up, was able to remove half of the issues that were found by the pen tester. I think, you know, there's a lack of quality in some of the pen testing organizations too. Some of them do a really good job, others not so much. So we really need to question the information that we're getting from our tools and take our developer side, because oftentimes we're taking the side of the pen testers, we're taking the side of security, but take an objective look at the issue and try to understand the app in the context that everything's working in, and second guess our pen testers. So that's pretty much all I have. And here's my contact information. You can reach me on Twitter or email. And do we have a couple minutes for questions? We have a couple minutes for questions if anyone has any. Yeah. I think what I found, oh, so the question was, is there any of this that you would do differently for an agile or DevOps type methodology? And I think all of the tenets hold true, but you have to do them a little differently. And one of the things that I found especially is when it comes to pen testing and vulnerability scan, if you do that pre-release, you may have to do a lighter touch. You may have to focus in on that functionality that was changed instead of doing a vulnerability scan on the whole application, because speed is very important. And a lot of the vulnerability testers and things like that, you can't turn a test around for a large application in 2 days. So you just have to focus in or do a light touch, just looking for high-risk applications. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all.